and just like going from there. And then some have had experience in these conversations before, and they were able to reflect on how they dealt with it. And some of us have very new experiences with certain things. Thank you for making it authentic for you. This actually happened. A conversation similar to this happened in a session with me last week. There was a core member that was like, I'm so sick of Teach for America trying to brainwash me with this one author. All you all talk about is Beverly Tatum. I am not the problem. I am not oppressing you people.
That sounded oppressive.
Okay, and I had to like compose myself because I know his intention was to kind of get out of the fact that he is representing the dominant culture. And it's uncomfortable. Like I have to meet him where he is. So let's just say that I feel that that shifting mindset is a process and it wouldn't change in that one moment, but I did try and address that he represents the dominant culture. That I'm not saying he is necessarily racist, but that he has to be aware of how the structure of institutionalized racism does play a part in our work. So it may not have happened to you yet, but I'm just going to be honest, it's happening to me, especially in the local community. So let's think through these two questions. What was challenging about these conversations? And two, in what ways do you think that awareness of your own identity can be an added layer of complexity? Yes.
I think, especially with the third scenario, the first thing I wanted to do is be like, that was so offensive to me. But how do you say that to someone and not make them feel like you're judging them personally? Like, I don't know, like, that was hard for me to just be like, this word that you use in particular, like, it's like very offensive to me. And then like, talking about my identity, I think if they saw me, they'd be like, why is that offensive to you? Not like, because of the color of my skin. And it's just like, how do you bridge that gap? I don't know.
So you're saying this feedback process was hard because of the layered complexity?
That, and then just like, I like wanted to go in with all these emotions and be like, that was horrible, I was offended,
I saw hands shoot up, so I think they're responsive. I don't want to respond there because I know they're not. Yes.
The last part about holding them accountable was hard because I had trouble thinking of how to hold them accountable. Like I can't punish them, I can't, give them a timeout. Like what do I do? How do I really make them see from my perspective or from someone else's perspective how that would affect? So I felt accountable was a broad, different word.
I was thinking for that one it applies to the student in particular. You have like a culture you're trying to set in your classroom. Hold the students accountable to that. But in every situation, like I said, the mindsets have to shift and it takes time before someone feels accountable for the words they use and the microaggressions impact. Yes.
I guess from my perspective, for the third one, it wasn't particularly hard for me to figure out how to act for that one. But honestly, like what I probably would have done is been like, look, I know it can be stressful dealing with kids talking all the time, but you gotta know that that's so far out of step and very offensive, and you need to watch what you say in the future. Like I would just like straight up say that.
So what you said about how to deal with it, honestly, like from experience, I know what it feels like to have those emotions and want to do it, but you kind of just have to, sometimes you have to break it down so other people can hear. Like in my example, I did the first one is I gave an example, well, I compared it to you saying that to me as me saying like your dad bought your way into college. Like, like, you're like, dang, like that's kind of hurtful. Like, how are you going to assume that I can make it great for myself? And how did you assume that I didn't make it great for myself? And then I realized that when you rush in with the emotions, then people just think that you're emotional and they don't take you serious. Whereas like education, like the reading are really important because like you know the background to certain things, like the background to definition of race or like prejudice. And so when people like 3, if we were like, do you know the history of that word? Do you know why it's offensive to people? Do you know why you shouldn't use it? Like people don't know the history of it. And I feel like when you know why people consider it offensive, like when you educate people, then they have something to really think about it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because one thing that I've heard a lot is people throw around like the word powwow, which they use it to mean like meetings and like having a group meeting, which isn't what it means. And so I think that that's true. Like people just don't understand the meaning of what they're saying because they don't understand what it's
I mean, I think Cecily did a really good job of addressing the behavior, but it was still super easy for me to turn the conversation towards like, well, who are you to tell me, like, I've been teaching for so much longer than you, who are you to tell me what I'm doing now? It was so easy to change that, make the conversation about something else, not behavior.
And that was the layer of identity, because you have an identity as a first year teacher and as a TFA member. So you could have easily also said, what are you, some kind of TFA, that kind of thing too. Like being one of the teachers in the school that's been there for so many years, like he easily turned my identity around on me, and it was really hard to navigate.
When I look at number 3, maybe not using these words, the strong words, but I've had a colleague who is a person of color say something like this about our students of color, so they made it harder for one of my other colleagues in particular to address those things. That's another one. Layered identity. It's complex. That's all handy.
I think it's important that none of us let our first year of teaching or any of that be used against us as not standing up against some type of either racial issues, whatever the issue may be. You know, if it's your values are independent of you being a teacher. And you know, being here, a lot of the reason I think a lot of us are here is because we stand for our values and like these issues are important to a lot of us. So I would just say, don't ever let someone try to use your inexperience as a teacher as a way to say your values on others.
It's a great segue into our next part. You want to add something? Okay, because we are going to now talk about archetypes and biases for relationships at work. I highlighted one. I'll go back to that. But what you said about for being a first year teacher and how that identity can play out in a school setting, especially people that have been working in schools for like 28 years. I want you to think pair with your partner in your work experience. Who's been your favorite manager? Why? What were the qualities of this effective leader? And then try and talk through the archetypes that you have for an administration team. Now, I've named up here just the ways an administration team can be labeled in different school settings. They're not always principals or school leaders. There can be teams of all types of things. Discipline, culture, and climate. Parent liaisons play a big part on the admin team. But just what are your archetypes of how these roles should look when you get to be?